Well, thank you all once again for tuning back in. You know, I'm putting up videos every Friday afternoon, and this is the start of the 2021 year. So we're at a little breaking point on this two-seat buggy rebuild that I'm in the process of. So I thought I'd just stop and start out this year with saying thank you for those of you who have been following along, many of you for the past 4 years. I started uploading these videos in 2016 at the onset of the Borax wagon rebuild, and many of you have been here from that get-go, and I appreciate that. There have been many that are just coming in new week by week, and I appreciate you also coming in, being introduced to this channel as we go through the process of the wheelwright trade and the Wainwright trade, working on old horse-drawn carriages of the American West. You know, a number of years ago I put out a quick little video when we crossed our 100th video upload. At that time we had 10 million views. Well, this year we have just crossed over our 200th video upload, and we have crossed over 39 million views. So once again, a big thank you for those of you who have been watching, have been sharing, and helped spread the word that this is an appropriate tool to go back and learn how the transportation era of the horse-drawn days really happened out here in the American West and really across the land. I put a few notes together just to try to help keep my thoughts a little more organized through this video. So I just wanted to say thank you for the past year or so. Many of you have sent little mementos through the mail to us here, and I haven't taken a lot of time to express thank you through a video. Hopefully we have responded to all of you. Diana is especially good at that, through the mail, through emails, and saying thank you. But through this video I'm going to intersperse some pictures of different items that have shown up over the past couple years so that you get a first-hand glimpse of what all has been coming into the shop in appreciation and support of this channel and what we're trying to accomplish. So over these past 4 years, you have watched me work with my own style, how I do, my own personality, my mannerisms, and the skill level that I have, such as it is. And many of you have called me by different names, hopefully pleasant, but some of you have called me OCD, some have mentioned that I'm a perfectionist, others have used the word fastidious. And so you kind of got me curious, what do some of these words mean? So I went on the internet and I looked up the definition of some of these terms, and I'm going to go through them briefly and just let you put me to the test as I put myself to the test. Am I OCD? Am I a perfectionist? Does fastidious apply to me? So let's see what we found. When I looked up OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, this is what I saw, that, you know, there's several characteristics that type of a person is afraid of germs. He excessively washes to stay clean of germs. He's constantly checking. He's constantly checking that the oven is off, that the doors are closed, that the doors are locked. I don't see myself in that category. OCD is heavily in doubt and considers them a sinner, that they're not perfect, so therefore they deserve to be punished. I'm not sure I see myself there. An OCD person is heavily focused on arranging things, counting things. They like order and symmetry. I like order and symmetry, so I've got some of that. And they can tend to be hoarders, that with the thought that something might happen, something bad will happen if I throw this away. Well, you know, I've actually had that happen, throw something away and a week later going, man, I wish I hadn't thrown that away. Am I a hoarder? Yeah, look at my junk pile. There might be some of you that say I'm a hoarder. So how about perfectionist? Do I fit the category of being perfectionist? Well, this is what I found also. A perfectionist tends to say it's either all or nothing. I don't know. Highly critical. I've been accused of being critical. We're pushed by fear. Maybe I'm inhibited by fear sometimes. I don't know. We'll consider that one. Perfectionist seems to have unrealistic standards, focus on results. Yeah, I focus on results. Hopefully I don't. Am I inhibited by unrealistic standards? I don't know. What do you think? Depressed by unmet goals. I don't think they're fear of failure. Procrastination. Well, I do deal with procrastination sometimes. Defensiveness. Yeah, maybe. Low self-esteem. I can't say it's never been there. So anyway, what about the next phrase or adjective, fastidious? Who is a fastidious person? Well, I found that a fastidious person is showing or demanding excessive care. Well, I do demand things of myself, that they are reflecting being meticulous, sensitive, or have a demanding attitude. Yeah, maybe so. How about having a high and often capricious, I had to look up capricious, high and often capricious standard or is difficult to please? If you talk to my wife, she'd say, yeah, he's pretty difficult to please sometimes. So, maybe I fit this fastidious category pretty well. Tend to be choosy, demanding, exacting, finicky, fussy, particular, persnickety picky. If you talk to my wife, she'd say, yeah, that's probably a pretty close description of who that knothead is. So anyway, what do you think? Your observation of me working these past 4 years, what do you think I fit? Am I OCD? Am I a perfectionist? Am I fastidious? Yeah, maybe some of all the above. Well, anyway, I went to college in Bozeman. I have a 4-year degree. I went through agricultural business, and I was being groomed mainly for the banking industry, so they shoved a lot of economic statistics, analysis, that type of stuff down my throat. And I got through it, but it wasn't really my forte. Really didn't see the practical application. So as you know, I'm not in the banking business, and I'm not really strongly in the agricultural business, but the economic part factors into any business when you're going to run a business for yourself. So early on, I received a number of helpful hints and advice from elderly friends, from my father, and some of these I'd want to share with you that I have taken to heart over these 41, 42 years that I have been doing the wagon industry in the wagon trade here. The first advice given by a friend who was some 20 years older than me, back when I started, I was late 20s. I started here when I was 25. And I wanted to do some bartering. I was impressed with who he was. And he stopped me and said, now listen, business is business, friendship is friendship, and don't mix the two together. That has stuck with me all these years. Business is business, friendship is friendship. And the two do not mix. When you keep the two separate, you're going to do better in the long run. Second thing that same individual told me is the worst thing in business you can do is not charge enough to stay in business. Then you're actually doing your customers the worst disservice, even beyond doing a poor job, by not charging enough so you can stay in business. So when you grow in your knowledge and experience in the business and expand, you are actually benefiting your customers by charging enough to stay in business. That piece of advice has been most helpful over all these years. My father told me once when I was daydreaming about going and doing and becoming bigger and better and all that, and he told me, says, don't advertise beyond what you can produce. In other words, keep your feet on the ground and be realistic about what you can do. Don't brag up a big story, say you can just cut a fat hog and do whatever, and then not be able to follow up on it. That has been helpful advice. Not that I've always held true to that. That's why I'm buried right now. But don't advertise beyond what you can produce. Learn when good enough is good enough. My father recognized that I was a perfectionist. I think maybe he dealt with it some too. But, you know, he reminded me that there is a time when you have to say, this is good enough. You know, for the most part, 99% of the people will not see what I see in my work. I am my own worst enemy, and most self-employed, entrepreneur-driven people tend to be their own worst enemy. I had to learn when good enough was good enough. Not to be complacent and not to be compromising and become a slacker, but to say, you know, that is good job, it's good enough, and next one maybe I'll do better. I look back on some of these videos that I produced 4 years ago and go, oh my goodness, how did you guys suffer through my rank amateur videography and my monotone voice on a lot of these videos? I would like to go back and change a lot of those videos. Hopefully you are putting up with me as I learn how to do this better, and hopefully these videos are beginning to become a little better. So even with each video, including this one, I'm going to get through when I'm done editing and say, it's good enough for where I'm at, for what I know how to do, it's good enough, and I'll learn how to do better on the next one. So another good piece of advice that I've been given is to have a mission statement. You see this a lot in entrepreneurial type addresses, books, counseling, that type of deal. Have a mission statement. Even if you don't write it down, the best thing is to write it down. I don't always take my best advice, but I do have a mission statement. For me, my first and foremost is if you can't put a horse to it and a horse can't pull it, I'm not interested in working on it. I am in the horse-drawn vehicle business. I don't fix furniture, I don't do upholstery on boats, I don't do upholstery in RVs, I don't fix flat tires on cars. I work on horse-drawn related. So if you can't hook it to a horse, don't be bringing it into my shop. Now that's not all together absolutely true, because I do help farmers fix haying equipment and mowers and buckets. I am a welder and I do that, but I do that for community's sake, to help in the community. But for business-minded sense, if you can't hook a horse to it, I don't work on it. That is the basis of my mission statement. Secondly, is it has to have wood wheels. There's all types of horse-drawn vehicles out there that do not have wood wheels. They're modern car tires, you know, all that type of stuff. Not interested. I am interested in old style, authentic style, wood wheel, wagons, buggies, carriages, coaches. That is part of my mission statement. Somebody brings in or wants me to build a hitch wagon that's on car tires made out of 2x6 fir, go down the road, I'm not interested. That doesn't fit my mission statement. And it has to have, or to be geared toward being authentic, old 1800, early 1900 styling. That is my goal, is to focus on that type of vehicles. So that's the basis of my mission statement here at Engels Coach in Joliet. Has been for 40 plus years and continues to be. So you have been watching these videos as I build these buggy seats on this two-seat buggy, and there's a number of questions that have come up repeatedly through this series, and part of that is, well, why do you use torque screws then? Well, how does this fit in to my mission statement? So, you know, some of these questions that I put down is, what about torque screws? They weren't used in the 1800s or 1900s. And I say, well, what about arc welding? What about a MIG welder? What about vinyl or Naugahyde style of upholstery materials? What about automotive paints? They weren't used back then. What about electric tools? What about laminated wood? You know, some of these questions start to surface so that you have to go, okay, where do I draw the line? So I in turn asked the question in response, what about reality and practicality? That's the world we live in today. We have to be real with where we're at, and we have to be practical with where we're at and how we do things toward our mission statement. What about cost effectiveness? What about customer satisfaction? What about price and budget constraints? What about material availability? We don't have the old growth lumber that was across this country back in those days. You know, when the heartland of the carriage and coach and buggy and wagon trade was in the Midwest, the northern Midwest, because of the virgin timbers, we don't have that anymore today. So we are forced to somewhat compromise. So we have to deal with that. So for me, part of my decision is I'm going to work with torque screws. They're quick, they're hardened, they're strong, they're efficient. But you know, if you've watched through this two-seat buggy, you're not going to see where those torque screws are when I'm done. You get the advantage of seeing where I use torque screws because you're following on these videos and I'm allowing you to see where I put those in. But when this vehicle is finished and when it's painted and done, you will not see a torque screw anywhere. I used to do some judging in wagons and buggies, be asked to be a judge. And one of those things that will knock you down quick is when you see Phillips head, sheetrock screws, and hex nuts. That is not authentic of that era. But if you hide those and in the proper place that you put a proper hex nut, proper style, that's a little different story. But if you leave them exposed and you go through a judging process, those will knock you down in the standing. But when I get done, I use whatever I need to use. Those will not be seen. Just how it was done in the old day. They used a material they called rough stuff. It was a lead-based, heavy paste material. And on a nice carriage, finished carriage, coach, wagon, that type of deal, you would not see a screw head. They were all disguised. Even the old original straight slotted screws were disguised. You did not see them. Now on this buggy, there are some that will be exposed, and you've noticed that I've interspersed between the two. Those that are exposed, I will put in an authentic slotted screw because you're going to see them. That fits. But when I use a torque screw underneath the framing, underneath the seat frame, putting some of this hardware on, to fit in my authentic mission statement, you will not see that torque screw. What about a welder? Well, I use a welder. And my goal is when I get done, you're not going to know where that weld was. Through my grinding, finishing, sandblasting, put it through the forge, whatever, my goal is that you don't see that weld where it is. I'll use foam in the process of upholstering, oftentimes because it's expedient, it's handy, it's easy to use, and it's less expensive, and sometimes that fits into customer requests. It's one of those hidden properties, and done correctly, some foam is way too soft, but done correctly, a hard, stiff foam can imitate horsehair in an upholstery. So I'll use foam. What about vinyls? You know, not everything was done in leather. There were some Bedford cores and broadcloths, you know, that type of stuff. A lot of it was done in leather. Leather tends to be about triple the price. That does not always fit everybody's budget, so oftentimes I will use a material that will take extreme cold, and I'll use a good quality vinyl for the sake of meeting the requirements of the customer. Now, automotive paints. I don't use catalyzed automotive paints. A lot of shops do. I don't. I used to. But I don't. But I will use an alkyd oil-based type paint, and there are some implement machinery style paints that are non-catalyzed, and I will use those type of paints. But a catalyzed paint, I choose not to. Now I'll use a spray gun, whether it's an HVLP. I don't use an HVLP. I use an old style siphon gun. That's just what I have become accustomed to. But I'll use that. I am not held under constraints of having to use a brush just because that's what they did. No, I'll use a spray gun. I'll use modern roller bearings where they're appropriate. I choose to use electricity. As you have well known, I don't do everything old school hand-wise just because that's how they did it back then, which is not always absolutely true. I use electricity. I turn the lights on. I use natural gas for heat and wood in my wood stove. but I choose to use that in the process of gaining my mission statement of coming up with an authentic finish style vehicle. And, you know, I drive a Dodge diesel dually. I don't mind driving modern vehicles. I am not constrained by saying, oh, I have to drive a buggy or a wagon to a horse. You know, it falls in the same category in my thinking of who I am, that, you know, I use different conveniences. I have a cell phone, I use the phone, I use a computer. That's just part of modern practicality and reality for me. Well, many of you started watching at the onset of these videos when I was doing the borax wagons. Well, you know, the first and foremost requirement of that project is that they had to be authentic when they were finished. When you put these two wagons side by side, or sets of wagons side by side, they had to be mirror images. They had to be exactly the same. Now, when I initially visited with the leadership of the Death Valley Conservancy and I began to understand what their goal was, that authenticity was first and foremost, and cost was secondary. Not that cost is never a factor, cost is always a factor. But I was quick to share with them that, you know, I can give you the end result, but there will be times and places where I will use modern conveniences and I will actually use a welder, but when we are done, you won't know where it is. And that's part of why I didn't film that. Not that you wouldn't see it in the finished product, but I didn't even video that to where you could see it and know where it happened, even though you could go look at those wagons and you would never see it today. So part of that was just upholding my promise to them that you will not know. Now when you put these wagons side by side, they are the same. Where it was forge welded and had to be forge welded for visibility's sake, they were forge welded. They were completely like they were back then. But again, this was the reality and practicality of where we're at today. So many of you think that because I went to that extent on those wagons, that's all I do. Everything has to be authentic and original. That is not true, because not all customers have that same base premise requirement that the Death Valley Conservancy and all the investors had for that project. That was that project. Other projects are different. This buggy that I'm working now, the customer owner on this has a different set of constraints, a different set of budgetary values, and a different end game goal in mind. So that becomes a different project. I switch my gears to that customer's requests and desires as long as it fits my mission statement. So when I first meet a customer or get involved in a project, my first and foremost goal is not the buggy or the wagon. My first goal and my first responsibility is to know the customer. Where are your values? Is this an heirloom? Are you going to work? Is it a working vehicle? Is it a collector? Is it an investment? What's your price range? What's your time status? All these things are first and foremost before we actually get into the finished vehicle itself. So I find myself kind of mixing and matching from customer to customer with my mission statement. How can I keep this authentic? How can I be practical? How can I fit within the time constraints? All these things factor in, and each job that comes in, since I'm a custom repair shop for horse-drawn vehicles, each job is different. So when you see how I did the borax wagons, you can't expect that I'm going to do this two-seat buggy exactly the same. Where I'm working with a different customer, the parameters are completely different, and I think you understand that. Now, I'm not a master of all my trades. You know, I try to get things done efficiently and proficiently as I can. But, you know, my least favorite of all the disciplines that I do here probably is upholstery. I suffer through it and I can get it done, but it's not my favorite. But I can do it, and I ended up forcing myself to learn to do that, because anyone I went to try to get their help on doing it was focused on modern household furniture, and the styling is completely different. So I began to do my own buggy tops. I began to do my own seat, because I knew in my mind what they had to look like, and so I began to push myself to learn those trades to to accomplish that goal. So I find myself on this OCD, perfectionist, fastidious scale, kind of a mixture maybe of some of all of those. And you probably see some of that also. It blends with my personality, it blends with my goal. I'm kind of a mixture maybe of some of it all. You know, we are averaging an additional 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers every month. You know, so those that come and view next week will not have seen this video, and those of you who are just joining today, you did not see how this two-seat buggy process started, so you have these new questions. And that's one thing I'm beginning to appreciate out of you who have been here long-term over the long haul and have this foundation of how things work. You're stepping in and answering some of those questions. And I really appreciate that, because it takes some of that load off of me. And I find myself kind of sometimes going, that question again? How many times have I addressed this? You know, but that's just part of the game, because they're the new kids on the block, and you are helping address that. You know, some of you thought you would never have any interest in how wheels go together, how buggies or wagons are built. But you have a knowledge base now from watching these videos that you are fully capable to go back and answer some of those questions, and I appreciate when you do. So just a big thank you for that. So for me, you know, when I watch you do that, to me I say, mission successful. They now know enough to answer those questions. And for me, that's a pretty cool thing. That preservation of knowledge and awareness of what happened and how it happened is being spread out through the base of you. You know, roughly 50, 60, 70,000 of you are watching a week, and that's a basis of awareness that was not there before. To me, that's pretty cool, and we are achieving what we wanted to do, preserving the history of the buggy carriage wagon trade. So I appreciate that. So I have a lot more to do. We have a lot of different projects to a lot of degrees. We have just got into kind of elementary woodworking, blacksmithing, kind of basic type of stuff. There's, well, the borax weren't all that basic. But we have a lot of projects coming up still to get into. So just a quick thank you for being here as long as you have. Thanks for following along. I look forward to keep on keeping on, as I like to put it. So most of all, just thanks for sharing, bringing your friends in, spreading out the word that there is this video library there. And most of all, thanks for watching.